Welcome to the MCTC Policy Board meeting of January 18th, 2023. The meeting is being held at the MCTC boardroom. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And we're going to take a roll call. Commissioner Ahmed.
Here.
We'd like to note that Commissioner Ahmed is attending remotely. He has business that he's doing for the city of Chowchilla.
Yeah, I just want to state for the record, I'm on the Cal City conference in Sacramento. That's why I'm unable to attend in person for this meeting.
Thank you. Commissioner Gallegos? Here. Commissioner Gonzalez? Here. Commissioner Poitras?
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
Here.
Commissioner Rogers?
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum. Now we would like to, we need to select a temporary chair. Do we
I'd like
have
to
any
make a motion to select Jose Rodriguez as the temporary chair.
Do we have a second?
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Commissioner Rodriguez?
I gladly accept.
Okay.
Do we have a
Okay,
first and a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hey, motion carries unanimously. Oh, we do have someone on Zoom. Did you want to
Yes.
take the roll,
yeah, I need to do a roll call.
please?
Commissioner Ahmed?
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers?
Yes.
Commissioner Gallegos?
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
Yes.
Commissioner Poitras?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
All
Meeting
right.
is yours.
With that, we'll just now call this meeting to order. We're now going to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll ask Commissioner Supervisor Poitras to lead us on the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right, very good. Ready, salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Poitras. With that, we move on to the election of officers. And I know we have this temporary chair, but with the election of the officers, what's the standard procedure for that there, Sandy? Are we going to?
So our vice chair was Diana Palmer,
Okay.
and she's no longer with us. So we usually alternate from city to county. So I would think that the next would be for the city rep to be chair and vice chair would be county.
I nominate Wasim Ahmed as the incoming chairman.
I'll second that.
Okay, we do have a motion from Commissioner Rogers and a second from Commissioner Poitras. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Sorry, Commissioner Rodriguez, we need to have,
I get that, I'm
we need
sorry.
to have a roll call
Yes.
since we have
Thank
someone.
you, we do
Okay.
have. Thanks for making it difficult for us. Thought we're back to one. Yes, go ahead, please take the.
Okay, Commissioner Ahmed,
Yes.
Commissioner Gallegos,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Yes.
Commissioner Poitras.
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
All right. At this time, do we also have a nomination for a vice chair?
Is there any particular order for that? Or
Then we go to a supervisor.
We usually go from city to county, city to county.
what was it before?
Supervisor Wheeler.
Okay. So we go to a city and
We have city for
Supervisor.
city of Chowchilla will be chair. So we'll go for vice chair.
Well, I would nominate that we have Commissioner Gonzalez as a vice chair. You're here as a. No,
Yeah,
no,
I was
okay,
gonna
yes.
nominate Rob.
Commissioner Gonzalez as vice chair.
Second that.
So we have a first and a second. Commissioner Poitras,
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yes.
Commissioner Gallegos,
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers.
yes,
Commissioner Ahmed.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, I think that concludes our election of officers. Secretary, anything else that we good? All
We're good.
right. So moving on, public comment. This time is made available for comments from the public on matters within the board's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. Attention is called to the fact that the board is prohibited by law from taking any substantive action on matters discussed that are not on the agenda, and no adverse conclusion should be drawn if the board does not respond to public comment at this time. It is requested that no comments be made during this period on the items that are on today's agenda. Members of the public may comment on any item that is on today's agenda when the item is called and should notify the chairman of their desire to address the board when the agenda item is called. Do we have any members of the public wishing to make any public comment? If so, please come to the podium. Do we have anyone via video or telephone?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay, well, that I will now close the public comment and move on to item 5, MCTC sitting of the Madera County 2006 Transportation Authority administrative consent items. All items on the consent agenda are considered routine and non-controversial by MCTC staff and will be approved by one motion if no member of the authority or public wishes to comment or ask questions. If comment or discussion is desired by anyone, the items will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered in the listed sequence with an opportunity for any member of the public to address the authority concerning the items before action is taken.
Move to approve consent calendar.
Okay,
A second.
we have a motion by Commissioner Rogers, second Commissioner Gonzalez. Before we move on to that, do we have any members of the public wishing to speak on any of these items? Remotely?
There are no hands raised.
Okay, so we now have a motion and a second. Sandy, can you please take roll?
Commissioner Ahmed,
Yes.
Commissioner Gallegos,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yes.
Commissioner Poitras,
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to item 6, authority action discussion items. Item 6A, measure T post-election analysis.
Thank you very much. At our November meeting, we provided you with some preliminary results of Measure T. And of course, since then, we have the final results for Measure T, which was yes was 52.29%, and the no votes were 47.71%. And during that discussion, it was a broad discussion regarding how to move forward and what to consider, reasons for failure, and it was recommended that we bring it back at a different time where we had a little bit more time to discuss, since that meeting was an extra long meeting in November, and it was at the end of the agenda. So we moved that item up further, at the beginning of the agenda to have a little bit more of a thorough discussion. But today we invited the consultant for the Measure T campaign to review with you the Measure T post-election results and provided an analysis. And so with that, I'd like to introduce to you Charles Heath. He's here with us from TBWBH Props and Measures. And he has prepared a PowerPoint presentation that was included in your package, and we'll bring it up on the screen and we'll go through that PowerPoint presentation with him.
Okay, thank you, Patricia. Good afternoon. I'm Charles Heath. I'm a partner with TBWBH Props and Measures. We're a consulting firm that works with a variety of different public agencies around the state when they're considering placing tax proposals on the ballot. And we worked for about 1.5 years with MCTC, MCTA on the development of Measure T. And then in the months immediately preceding the November election, we also worked with the campaign committee that ran the advocacy campaign in favor of Measure T. So obviously the results of Measure T aren't what we had hoped for. Whenever we come up short of the challenging 2/3 threshold, we go back and do a thorough analysis to try to learn what we can from the available data and archive those lessons learned so that we can utilize those as we figure out a path to move forward to a successful election. So we've done a thorough analysis of all the publicly available data from the Madera County Registrar of Voters Office. And I'll share that with you today, along with some conclusions that we drew from our side, but we're also eager to hear your perspectives as leaders and residents of the county. So Nick, can you go to the next slide here? Let me just start by summarizing the data that we have available to us for analysis. So first of all, we can look at support and opposition to Measure T down to the precinct level. So we can do a very thorough geographic analysis of where Measure T did well, where Measure T struggled. What we can't do is look at who voted yes and who voted no individually, which would be what is required to say, oh, it did better among men versus women, or Democrats versus Republicans, or older voters versus younger voters. We can take some guesses at that just by looking at the nature of the precincts where we did well and not as well. But, you know, when you're watching CNN on election night and they say, you know, Biden outperformed Trump among women, they know that because of exit polling, not because there's any publicly available data that would tell you that. We can look at voter turnout down to the individual voter level. So as you'll see, as we get into this, we have lots of data in terms of different demographic groups and how they voted in this particular election. We can also look at the timing of turnout in the election. Now that everyone gets a mail-in ballot in our elections in California, it's important to understand when do most voters cast their ballots so that campaigns can time their communication so that they're reaching voters when they're about to vote and making their decisions. And then we'll finish with some conclusions. Next slide, Nick. Okay, so first of all, at the highest level, as Patricia just summarized, Measure T ended up receiving a little over 52% of the vote. Obviously, that's well shy of the 2/3 threshold required, about 14 percentage points shy. So you can look at two different ways of how you would have gotten from where we ended up to a potential victory. One is through persuasion, and we would have had to shift a little over 5,000 votes, 5,169 to be exact, from no to yes in order to reach that 2/3 mark. Another way to look at how you can make up the difference is through voter turnout, right? Through get out the vote activities. That's a bit of a stretch in this situation. We would have had to mobilize over 15,000 additional yes votes in order to get from the 52% we ended up with to the 2/3 vote. So my takeaway from that is this had more to do with persuasion and people being persuaded to vote yes versus no versus some shift in voter turnout. We'll see more data to support that conclusion. Next slide. We can look at the yes/no vote based on how people cast their ballot, right? Voters have two options for how they vote. They can return that mail ballot that they received, or they can visit one of the in-person voting centers available to them in advance of election day or on election day. In this election, over 90% of the ballots were cast by mail. That's how the vast majority of people ended up voting. When we look at the differences in support between mail ballots and in-person votes, Measure T did quite a bit better among those mail ballots, 53.3% yes, and struggled among those in-person ballots, only 42.2% yes. That's a trend that we see pretty consistently across the state because of the national messaging around concerns of the sanctity of mail ballots. Those in-person ballots tend to skew much more conservative, and obviously that's not a group that tends to support tax measures at the same level. So, next slide. The next couple of slides compares the final election results for Measure T with the pre-election polling that was conducted. So True North Research, a polling firm that does lots of work throughout California, conducted two polls on Measure T to help inform the decision to place the measure on the ballot. The first of those polls was conducted in August of 2021. And in each of those polls, voters were presented a potential mock-up of the ballot measure 3 times over the course of the survey. Initially, before they had heard any more information about Measure T, then they heard descriptions of how the funds would be used and positive arguments in favor. That's the interim ballot test that you see there. And then the final ballot test was after they had heard a simulated opposition campaign or negative arguments. So in that initial survey in August of 2021, you can see support ranged between 73% and 79%. Everything looked very positive, which is why we kept going forward with the process. Knowing that quite a bit of time had elapsed, almost a year before you all would be asked to place the measure on the ballot, we conducted a tracking survey in April of 2022, and we found similar results, although slightly diminished. After voters heard the negatives in that survey, we were getting close to the 2/3 mark. We were at 68.1%. Obviously, the 52% we received on election day deviates significantly from the polling results, which raises the question why, right? What happened between the time that we conducted the poll and the time that people voted that would have resulted in such a significant difference? So, Nick, if you can go to the next slide. The first question we ask ourselves, any poll is based on a sample of voters, right? So you have to take an educated guess at who's going to vote in the election that we're proposing to put the measure on the ballot. And what you'll see here is a demographic breakdown of those that were modeled in our sample to vote. And that's the first set of percentages by each of those demographic groups, younger Democrats, middle-aged Democrats, older Democrats, et cetera. The middle column is the actual breakdown of each of those demographic groups in the actual vote in the November 2022 election. And then the far right column is the difference. And what you can see is that there's some minor differences plus a percentage point, minus a percentage point here or there. The biggest changes is Republicans age 65 and over were about 3% higher in the actual vote than they were in our sample. Also dual Republican households and households where multiple Republicans live, they were also about 3% higher. So some marginal shifts there between what we modeled in terms of voter turnout and what it actually was, but certainly not enough to explain the 14 percentage point difference between our polling and the results we got on election day. So it doesn't seem that there was some big shift or surge in turnout that explains the outcome. Go to the next slide. And we'll come back to this. That was a sort of a comparison of the polling, but again, as I suggested earlier, it seems that there was a persuasive effort that shifted the vote more so than a surge in turnout. As I mentioned earlier, we can also look at support and opposition for Measure T by area. So this slide looks at results by city. So you can see that Measure T did the best in the city of Madera, where we received 61.3, shy of the 2/3 margin, but over 60%. The city of Chowchilla, a little over 52%, kind of mirrors the county-wide results. And then in unincorporated Madera County, support was quite a bit lower, only about 49%. And that, as you can see, represented about 2/3 of the votes cast in the election. So obviously that was a critical contributing factor to the outcome. And then similar analysis here, but breaking it down by supervisorial district. You can see that Measure T did best in Supervisor District 4, about 64% support. Next best in District 3, about 60%. But then you can see the big outlier here is Supervisor District 5, only 48% support. And if you look at the far right column, that was over 1/3 of the vote, 37%. So that's clearly an area that needs some focus as we look to right the ship for a future measure. So again, to try to understand some of the demographic trends in support, we take a close look at the demographic makeup of the precincts where we did the best and where we did the worst. And when we did that, we saw a very obvious correlation around partisanship. So this slide represents all of the precincts in the county where Measure T received over 60% of the vote, right? So these are where we did best. You can see there's 3 precincts at the top there where we received over 70% of the vote. So those are precincts where Measure T actually passed. And the correlation that we see is the precincts where Democratic registration is the highest and Republican registration is the lowest are the places where Measure T did best. So there's a partisan element here that, again, when you need a 2/3 vote, you need people of all political persuasions to be supporting the measure. So that partisan divide is something that will have to be overcome going forward. Slide. So from here, we'll turn our attention to voter turnout. We'll go to the next slide. So of the roughly 72,000 voters in Madera County, we expected that about 58% of them would cast a ballot in this election. That's based on an analysis of past similar midterm gubernatorial elections like we had in 2022. Based on that analysis, we thought it would be about 58%. At the end of the day, about 51% of voters cast ballots in that election. That's consistent with what we've seen statewide in this election. The gubernatorial and statewide issues were particularly competitive. That didn't draw out a lot of voters unless you were in a competitive congressional district, which we saw depressed turnout throughout the state. So while 51% of voters in the county cast a ballot, period, only about 49% cast a ballot on Measure T. So there's about 3.5% drop off, people that voted, but they didn't make it down to Measure T. That's actually a fairly low level of drop off. We can see that be as high as 10% in a general election where you have a long ballot, lots of stuff on for people to vote on. So it seems like people knew Measure T was on the ballot. It's not that they overlooked it. It had more to do with their opinions on the issue. So next slide. Now we'll look at voter turnout by party. So this slide looks at the percentage of Democrats that voted, percentage of Republicans that voted, and then other minor party and independent voters. You can see here that, again, turnout was lower than expectations across the board, more so among Democrats than Republicans. And Nick, if you go to the next slide, then if you look at this another way, which is the percent of the total ballots cast by party, proportionally, everything was more or less in line with expectations. Republicans were about a percentage point higher, Democrats about a percentage point lower, but no major shifts that you would say, okay, that's the reason for the outcome. Same analysis here by age. You can see that only about 24% of voters 18 to 24 cast a ballot in this election. That's pretty low, but that's what we expected. You can also see at the other end of the age spectrum, 79% of voters over the age of 65 cast a ballot. That's also close to what we expected. So again, across the board, decreased turnout compared to expectations. Go next slide. And then if we look at age in terms of the percentage of the overall vote cast, again, some small differences in terms of what we would expect compared to what happened. Older voters were a slightly larger portion of the vote than we would have expected. Younger voters slightly less, but again, no major surges based on age. Slide. And then turnout by area. You can see here that turnout was the highest by far in the unincorporated area. About 67% of voters in that unincorporated area voted, a little higher than we would have expected. And then voter turnout was lower in both of the cities of Chowchilla and Madera. Next slide. And if we look at the vote cast by area, the unincorporated area made about a little over 1% higher percentage of the overall vote cast than we would have expected, and the other areas lower. And then same analysis by supervisor district. Everyone across the board was lower than expectations, although again, District 5 was quite high. And if you go to the next slide, this is the percent of total votes cast by supervisor district, and you can see 1, 2, 3, and 4 were below expectations, whereas District 5 made a little more than 1% larger share of the vote than we would have expected. And obviously, there was a competitive supervisorial district in District 5, so I think that may have some part of the explanation for why turnout was higher there. We go to the next slide. Now we're looking at the rate of ballot returns in the county. So again, it's important to understand when people are voting, so communication can be timed appropriately. What we saw here, and again, consistent with what we saw in statewide trends, the vote came in very, very late. So you look at those final days before the election, November 2nd, 7th, 8th, that's when the vast majority of the ballots were coming in. So, you know, it's always important to communicate early in a campaign so you can frame the debate, make sure people understand the issue, but you have to retain some resources to make sure you're communicating at the very end, which is when most voters are finally focusing on the issues and choosing how to vote. So I think there's some interesting data there and trends to apply to future elections. And then this is the same analysis, but just looking at the ballot returns by party. And you can see there that while all voting groups voted late, that slope gets really steep among those Republican voters at the end. So again, those are people that are either returning their mail ballots at the very end of the election or voting in person. And then finally, we'll go through a few conclusions here. Next slide. So first of all, I just wanted to summarize kind of what the campaign did. The campaign focused on raising money, recruiting meaningful endorsements, and getting our message out through a variety of different channels. We did over 1,000 lawn signs, 50 road signs, 4 persuasive mailers, text messaging, robocalls, Facebook and web advertising, and had a fairly robust endorsement list. I don't think it was a lack of communication that resulted in the outcome for Measure T. We closely followed the messaging that our polling said was most persuasive to voters. Obviously, there was opposition activity out there that I think undermined the vote. But you know, we certainly do have some campaigns where we just didn't get our message out. I don't think that was the case here. By comparison to most tax measure campaigns on a countywide level, this is a fairly robust campaign. Next slide. So then what hurt Measure T? I think there were both some long-term factors and some short-term factors that impacted the outcome. First of all, as we all know, we live in a highly partisan environment these days. And as I mentioned, when you need a supermajority vote, 2/3, you have to be able to overcome those partisan divides. We need some moderate conservatives that are willing to vote for a tax, even though that may be in conflict with some of their ideology. When you're in a national environment where it's so partisan with the January 6th hearings, I mean, we've really seen this since 2016, 2020, but people are really embedded in their partisan ideology, and getting people to cross over becomes more challenging. And that's a factor that we're dealing with all places, not just here in Madera. We also know that there were some economic challenges this summer, inflation, gas prices. I mean, that was kind of the centerpiece of the national debate. People were feeling the price at the pump, so to speak, and what we saw in lots of tax elections around California is that created a real headwind and challenges for tax measures as people were concerned about their economic status. And then there were certainly some local factors, that competitive supervisorial race in District 5, increased turnout in an area that tends to be more conservative and challenging. There was a focus on the until ended by voters or permanent nature of Measure T. I think that became a lightning rod and certainly undermined support. The fact that there was still time to bring a renewal measure back to the ballot before it expires I think gave people kind of an out and felt that, well, we can do this another way before this funding expires. And then obviously there's ongoing issues just related to transportation and construction in the area that, is can be a concern for some voters. Next slide. So then some of the short-term factors kind of within the confines of the election. One, opposition. Whenever you need a 2/3 vote, it's hard to succeed when you have resistance against your messaging. So, and there was a robust campaign against Measure T, particularly in that District 5 area. So, thinking about how we can try to mitigate that in future elections, I think build broad consensus that will be important to success. And then obviously the no sunset. We have more time to do this is another factor that needs to be revisited for a future measure, because that was sort of the focal point of the opposition campaign. And then lastly here, just some recommendations for moving forward. I mentioned opposition is a real challenge when you need a 2/3 vote. So, you have at least 2 years now before the next time a measure would be on the ballot. You could also look at 2026 before the measure expires. Some outreach to those opposition groups to try to neutralize future opposition, or at least limit opposition to kind of the fringe extreme. That's going to be important for future success. Also, proactive outreach and communication to make sure that the community thoroughly understands how important Measure T funding is for transportation here in Madera. I think an ongoing effort to make sure that awareness is there is going to be important. And talk to the community about, a future measure and whether a 20-year duration or a 30-year duration might make sense, but coming to some consensus around the duration of the measure is going to be important. And then the last piece is, our campaign was successful in, like I said, raising money, getting key endorsements, communicating through mail and advertising. I think there is more we could do through grassroots engagement and trying to engage with voters directly and mobilize voter turnout to help support a future measure. Typically, persuasion plus GOTV and mobilization is critical when you need to hit that 2/3 mark. So that's the information I have to share with you today, and happy to answer any questions you have.
Yes, Commissioner Rogers.
Yeah, I believe that there was a single factor involved in its defeat, and it was the no sunset clause. That was the single factor. I kept hearing among opposition the forever tax, and that resonated with people, unfortunately, and it's important that if we're going to do another measure, that we engage that portion of the measure and decide when it will sunset. And it's going to have to, because that's what the voters were saying. And that portion of the voters that controlled this narrative, they wanted that to be a focal point of the campaign, and it was successful. So I was hearing that loud and clear, and there was something else I was going to say about it, but I'm foggy on it right now, so I may address it later.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think that was a primary factor in the defeat. And, it's interesting. I worked with the city of Madera 6 years ago on a public safety measure that is until ended by voters. No one batted an eye at it. It wasn't an issue, but clearly it was an issue here. And we've seen that before, that when voters fixate on, or when opposition fixates on that issue, it can really swing the vote.
What I was going to say on that now, and that is that what I was hearing was that they like Measure T, that they knew was necessary. Measure T was necessary, but they didn't like that it didn't sunset. And so the forever tax thing was the hinge pin in its defeat.
Yeah, Commissioner Gonzalez.
So, Patricia, you said that you had a fairly decent budget. Has there been any efforts post-election to notify folks that the measure didn't pass? Because when it comes up in 2 years or whenever it comes up, what I worry about is that folks are gonna say, well, didn't we just pass something? Like whatever percentage. So maybe a lot of folks don't know that the measure didn't pass. And since we still have an active plan until 2020.
Right, we're going to take a focus on continued education, continued outreach, public engagement, kind of re-educating. We have not done anything and sent anything out specifically related how it did not pass yet. kind of taken a breather. It was a lot of work over the past 2 years. As it looks right now, we're gonna keep our doors open. But it's not something I would recommend that we could move forward with in 2 years. It's gonna take a lot of work to, besides the, either be a 20 to 30 year measure. That was obvious that we're going to be looking at a 20 to 30 year measure, depending on what direction we take. But there was a lot of opposition out there, and that was one of them. The other was not engaging the public. The other one was the funding categories, the categories that were set up, that not enough was going to certain areas, but it really depended on where you were lived or what area you represented. There was some history related to the current measure and how there's certain groups that are not pleased with how the current measure is moving forward. There were certain actions that were taken related to certain projects due to unforeseen circumstances or budget, or we're trying to remain flexible on trying to move projects forward. Measure T is not the only source of funding for transportation. It's the source of funding we use to match other projects. And so we really only, for this current measure, anticipating over 200 million over a 20-year period, which is not very much compared to what you hear from other self-help counties. So we have to kind of strategize and figure out, how are we going to use our funding? What's the needs in the city are different than the needs in the city of Chowchilla, and the needs are different than the mountain community and the ranchos. So it's very diverse. It's going to take a lot of work, but the first step is public education. And I personally would like to see us do some sort of newsletter type of dissemination, similar to what you do on your Fridays, like getting the word out there and seeing it over and over again, because people don't, as we knew from the beginning, unfamiliarity with what Measure T is. What is Measure T? Now you see all the roads washed out, and I'm like, yeah, you'll get some emergency funding, but there's going to be a lot of funding that's going to have to go towards your, repairs of your local streets and roads, and bringing them back up to standard. And Measure T was very helpful. We only have a couple more years left, and it was very helpful in future planning. It was very helpful to be able to identify a plan to access funds down the future. So for instance, we plan, it's planning. We don't just write a plan and get the money today. It takes years, and it takes years to deliver a project. So there's just a lot of work. We'll just leave our doors open. We won't shut them closed. We won't close them right now, but I think that if I was going to make a proposal today, it's focus more on education and look at more of 2026, although both of them have pros and cons. Going in 2024 has a whole list of reasons you should go, and there's reasons you shouldn't go. And then there's a whole list of reasons you should go in 2026 and reasons you shouldn't go in 2026. So is there ever going to be the right time? Probably not. But you definitely need the support. If you see in the numbers that Charles provided, 67% almost is very hard to pass. There was only one county that passed, and that was San Francisco. And we were able to do it in past years, and we have been successful. So that's why we did move forward. We do know that your constituency is in support of Measure T. We only heard positive things when we went out and spoke on public education presentations. It was all positive feedback. But when you have opposition, you can't have anyone opposed to the measure and get a 67% and succeed.
Thank you. I'm sorry, what was the name again?
Charles.
Charles, thank you for the presentation. I'm not sure if any other commissioners have any comments at this time. Yes.
I would like to, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Weston, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to say, even though I know we have been letting people know the projects that we do with Measure T, but I think we need to make them more aware going into the future all the project that we are doing with the Measure T, public need to know that where the money is being spent. So we need to kind of start planning. So even though we have been letting them know, but we need to double that effort on the highlighting on the projects that we have been doing and we will be doing. And also, I think I know we have two options in 22 and 24. Just learning from this current, I think we should go for 22. At least we should have, because it's such an important measure that we know a lot of our project depend on it, that we at least as a backup, we have one more shot at it. So we should put all of our effort into the 24. So then we have one more as a, left for 26 as well. That's just my input. We need to start working on it sooner the better. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ahmed. Commissioner Rogers?
Yeah, I just had an epiphany while he was talking about putting more emphasis on projects that were Measure T funded. And one of the things I noticed is that when you look at the signs that are put up for projects, you get this little sign at the beginning of a project or the each end of it or whatever. And there's a number of things on that. And Measure T is somewhere in there most of the time, but it kind of gets lost in the messaging. And I almost think we need a brand like we had for the sign that would pop and say, hey, Measure T helped this project. Because I think if people saw that every time and it began to register with them, oh, without Measure T, this wouldn't have been done. And this is funding this. And I know in my district, there were 30 miles of roads that wouldn't have been paved without Measure T in one subdivision alone, one subdivision area, county responsibility area. It's startling. And I think it would have, I don't know that it was even advertised in there at all, but it just strikes me as important to brand it.
Thank you, Commissioner Rogers. I'll conclude. I'm not sure if Commissioner, you have any?
I have no comments.
We do know that based on the analysis that there's two things that we needed, right? We needed the youth to vote more, and we also needed 15,000 votes from Chowchilla. That didn't happen. But I was kind of discouraged not to see that the youth, and maybe I can ask Nick what's going on with that generation. Give us some insight. But did see on that, maybe the off midterm elections could be an issue there. But I do feel that 2024 is fast approaching. 2026 is just soon after. And I know that the city of Madera cannot afford not to have those sales tax or those tax revenues that we use, a lot of it for maintenance and operations. I think the last time we spoke to our staff, that's a pretty big chunk of money that we utilize, not only to leverage for projects, but at the same time, it helps with our maintenance and operation. So the question that I have is you did say that you're not ready for it in 2 years, but what we need to do something, because we can't be left out hanging dry in there, just not knowing that we may not have this opportunity again.
As a person who was married to this for 2 years, it's hard for me to paint a pretty picture, because what we went through with this, there was a lot of resources, a lot of staff work, very, very expensive election that we haven't received the bill yet for. And that the cost to do that, we need to have the support of all of the elected officials to assist in this. We need the support of all your staffs, and your staffs were awesome. They went with us to all of our public education meetings. They were great to work side by side because they can tell a story. We administer the funds, and so we aren't really hands-on. So it's great to have your staffs involved, but we need you all involved as well. We need your voices out there. Your constituency. I'm not saying that that you all were playing a part of it, but in today's world with social media, I couldn't respond to social media comments, even though I would love to have commented on social media and straightened information out, but there's a fine line between what we can and can't do. So I feel like there's so much work that needs to be done to repair some of the, I'm gonna call it damage that was possibly done just from some of the opposing comments that were made. And everybody has their points of views and everybody has their right to their opinion. And when you dive deep into information, opposing arguments are accurate and opposing arguments are not so accurate. Our education comments may not be as accurate as we would, that we might be portraying them to be. I don't know, but I just feel like a lot of work will need to go into it. It was 2 years. So that would mean that we would already need to begin by at least July at the soonest. I mean, at the latest, not at the soonest. I mean, and start that whole process all over again if you choose to do a steering committee and going out and preparing an investment plan. The obvious is you eliminate the until ended by voters. Totally, you put 20 to 30, you need to decide whether or not you want 20 to 30 a year. You need to look at how you want, where do you want the funds to go? Do you want the funds to go strictly just to road rehab and maintenance? Then that's a discussion to have. Or do you want capital projects on state routes or not? Bicycle pedestrian facilities, covering something in there for everyone. So we just need to have that discussion. I just felt like I can blink in 2 years, it's gonna be 2024 already. So it would mean we need to get down now and work with those who are opposing and ask what do you want to see in the plan? If they're able to develop something. Oftentimes we had asked some others and it was just more public engagement, but yet we felt like we were doing a lot of public engagement. So what else do we need to include in the plan? And it needs to be what's right for you all. The jurisdictions that you represent, your jurisdictions have needs and you see it firsthand before our agency actually sees some of it. I didn't know if Charles had any comments, but that's why I thought we'd leave our doors open. We'll explore it. We'll look to see what we can do. Public education is definitely at the top of the list. Rebranding was another discussion we had. That was the campaign committee had a great sign. It did pop. And I only heard positive comments regarding that. So what do we need to do?
I think the prime example is what, you showcased that in a social post, the road on 18. I mean, that looked pretty bad. I mean, that's kind of why we need these revenues. But more importantly is we know that people felt disengaged because of the message that was out there, right? Forever tax. Although, for me, it seems like it's forever because we've had this going on for over 30 years, right? But I mean, just the fact that it's in perpetuity, I think people just find that like, well, it's forever. The word forever maybe disengage some folks. But the other, I think my biggest thing is that the demographics that were shown there obviously show that the 65 and older folks are certainly very engaged in their political decisions and decision making. But it seems like the younger generation may feel disenfranchised. And I don't know if we're not doing a good job of bringing them in. So if in fact we bring in this committee again, I'd love to have more of the younger folks out there because I think they can do a better job also of the tweets, the Facebook, the Instagram. I probably do 3 social medias, but there's probably 10 or 15 of them. And which one is the most popular? Who can do this and that? And I think that helps a bit, at least for folks who get some type of information and knowledge that there's this big decision that needs to take place. And this is why we need to support it. But I feel that would be also another component of our, because I know it's a lot of work. It's a big undertaking. Because I remember being part of the steering, I thought it was going to be 1 or 4 meetings. These were a series of meetings and a lot of back and forth. Certain folks weren't happy, but at the end of the day, I think the consensus was that we move this route. And we all decided that, yes, this should be a tax. It should be in perpetuity because we're going to need it down the road. Unfortunately, we know that didn't work with certain voters. And again, the fact that there was some other campaigns going on in certain areas. That didn't help either. But we learned from this, and I think we just have to be resilient, come back, and hopefully we have a better plan here to make sure that we pass this.
Quick question, so, anyway.
Mr. Chair, I think we also need to take a look at the results by area. And it's on this page, and it shows City of Chowchilla, yes votes 52.4%, unincorporated Madera County 48%, 48.8%, and then City of Madera 61.3%. Those are severe differences, significant differences. And it wasn't, a lot of turnout, from the City of Madera. And, and you look at the City of Madera compared to other areas, and there's big differences in terms of age, demographics, so on and so forth. And so I believe that, the type of approach for outreach really is going to have to be different and very targeted. Because I think that what would satisfy people in the City of Madera is not going to satisfy people in Madera County and vice versa, or not resonate. So, I think that we brought up, it was brought up during the campaign, that, or prior to that, that the City of Madera has fewer roads, road miles, and yet generates significant sales tax that goes towards repairs and so on and so forth. And I think that, we really need to consider, if we go into this research and do a lot of outreach and are still getting significant pushback, that we may have to consider maybe going just with a measure in the City of Madera, and then versus the county. Because what I don't want to see is fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me.
Right.
I don't want to see the County of Madera lagging, or still voting it down, and then it penalizes the City of Madera. So I do think that that's an approach that we seriously need to consider.
I wouldn't disagree. I would actually agree with that. And not that I want to sound biased, but I mean, I think that would certainly hinder the ability of a city like Madera that I represent. Obviously, I represent the organization, but it's huge. I mean, like I said earlier, I think the taxes are huge. So I certainly agree. Commissioner Rogers, did you have a?
Yeah, just had a question. Do you think that the T is stigmatized now so much that it has to be different? We have to go with a different measure. Is it so stigmatized, or is it just that it has a label, the forever tax, that can be erased and get back to what it's really all about, and that's fixing our roads?
It's an interesting question, and we specifically requested Measure T from the Registrar of Voters because we figured it would be confusing to say this is the renewal of the Measure T and it's called Measure C, right? I mean, it's hard to get voters to connect the dots. So certainly, before you put a new measure on the ballot, I would recommend some additional public opinion polling, and that may be an issue to investigate in that to see if it is tarnished, or does the value of the continuity of T from the original tax, is that a benefit?
Well, thank you, Charles. I really do appreciate your presentation. Commissioners, thank you for your comments. Anyone else wishing to make a comment? Yes,
I
Commissioner.
do, Chair Rodriguez, just one comment that Patricia said, that as elected and leaders here, people do go to us for advice and for knowledge. And we were out there really giving them the 411 on Measure T and how it's done great things and what it has accomplished. As you stated, Charles, the supervisor race in District 5, which you saw the voting wasn't well. We did have a candidate out there. I was at several debates just bashing Measure T to the end. And again, after I'm trying to do damage control, but I can only reach so many at those debates. So again, they do look at leaders, they do look at electeds to see information. And that, I think, was in that area hurt us the most. Was we did have somebody out there and I did speak with him and trying, but again, it was they're entitled to their opinion. I get that, but overall, you've got to do what's best for this community. and this county. And the foresight was not there. And again, the education wasn't there. And people were looking to the two candidates for information on that measure. And I think if we would have not had that negative aspect from that one candidate, I think we wouldn't be sitting here today talking about Measure T. So the supervisor that did win that race is in support of Measure T as of all the electeds. And I think that if we did put it and we went forward, I think we would have a great opposition to show that this is something good. I agree with Supervisor Rogers about the branding and especially looking forward, maybe it might be in the city, is whatever we feel that's the best, but the knowledge that we need to make those decisions is probably imperative and under the gun right now about making those decisions if we decide. So I thank you for the presentation. I went through it this last week and I was so impressed. It was everything that I was asking for was like right there. So thank you for that.
I'll end with this, Commissioner Rogers, you did say to rebrand. Were you thinking something like Measure M with the golden arches, maybe?
Could be,
Yeah.
you never know.
I'm sure we can bring that back to your meeting and see how we can start that with the steering committee. But with that, thank you again, Charles. I will ask for any public comment. Anyone from the public wishing to comment? Yes, please.
I'm Janice Gomes. I'm in District 1, but I own property in District 5. And I am the dreaded Republican Party, but Oakhurst or the mountain, I'll say Eastern Madera County was the no sunset and projects. You need to make sure if you're going to mention projects, if they ask for projects in the future, it was that they don't have any projects for us in 30 years. You might not have had any in maybe a year or 2 years, but you need to go down the line. We've got this going this year, this year, this, and go for each supervisor district and list them out that way. I think that would have helped you too, because my sister, unfortunately, was really in opposition against it because of no projects. And then there's bike lanes and there's this, they're not gonna have any money for anything. That's my opinion to help you guys out.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wishing to make a comment? Okay. We do have someone on online. You can please unmute yourself.
Leadership Council, you are able to speak.
Thank you. This is Madeline Harris from Leadership Council. Thank you for this presentation and discussion. You know, I think it's important to see that it didn't pass anywhere in Madera County when we look at the city of Madera, city of Chowchilla, or Madera County. So when we talk about, you know, needing to do additional outreach to either persuade voters or eliminate opposition, I think we need to really look at why is it that this Measure T didn't pass in any of the jurisdictions in the county. And I have to say, I really agree with a lot of the discussion that you had around the forever tax issue, the no sunset clause, the lack of community engagement, and you know, failure to deliver projects in every community being some of the key reasons why the measure was able to be, you know, defeated. And I just think that, you know, my key recommendation to this board would be to start doing in-person like convenings and workshops with folks who opposed the measure, with stakeholders who supported the measure, and hear from people directly about why did they not like the measure, or why did they vote in support of it, and what do they want to be in a future measure. So when we say public engagement on this, what we mean is doing in-person workshops where you can hear from folks directly and partnering with organizations that can get turnout for those meetings. And what we don't mean is Zoom meetings at 1:30 in the afternoon on Thursdays, where there's limited ability for members who aren't part of a steering committee to speak and share their thoughts. So again, I just want to underscore that if we want Measure T to be renewed, we need to all get together and, talk about how we can make that happen and what, stakeholders and residents from all across Madera County need and want to be, included in that measure. Thanks.
Thank you, Madeline. Do we have anyone else wishing to make a public comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ellen Bitter, I'm with the city of Madera. I'm also a Madera County resident. So one point that I don't know was covered well and something I think we need to consider moving forward is historically it was beneficial to move our measure at the same time Fresno County moved their measure. We benefited from a lot of positive feedback and advertising in past measures. This year, I think their negative campaign really influenced the outcome in Madera County because I think people got confused. They didn't know that they were talking about issues that were happening in Fresno County and the community members that were opposed in Fresno County. And I think they were confusing that with Madera. So I think moving forward, we need to really keep an eye and study on what Fresno's doing. Is it good to partner with them and follow that? Or maybe do we take our own path and create our own vision that won't get muddied with Fresno? Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Is there anyone else here in the audience that's wishing to make a public comment? Anyone else in the remote, virtual?
No hands raised.
Okay. Close public comment. This is a information and discussion only. So we'll move along to item 7, transportation consent items. MCTC sitting as a transportation policy committee. All items on the consent agenda are considered routine, non-controversial by MCTC staff and will be approved by one motion. If no member of the committee or public wishes to comment on or ask questions. If comment or discussion is desired by anyone, the item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered in a listed sequence with an opportunity for any member of the public to address the committee concerning the item before action is taken. We have anyone from the public wishing to make a comment? Okay. These are consent items.
I'll move for approval.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Poitras. Did I hear a second from Commissioner Rogers? Sandy, can you take the roll, please?
Commissioner Ahmed,
Yes.
Commissioner Gallegos,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yes.
Commissioner Poitras.
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez, yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Rodriguez, sorry.
Right. So moving along to item 8, transportation action discussion items, state legislative update, MCTC draft 2023 state legislative platform and governor's proposed fiscal year 2023-24 state budget. And I believe that's you, Ms. Taylor.
That is all of that.
All right.
With us today, we have Gus Corey. He is our lobbyist from Sacramento area, and he will be sharing with us a briefing on the governor's budget. We're just kind of following it at this time and looking for areas of concern or of interest. He's also prepared a draft platform, took last year's, we revised accordingly to some actions that have taken over the past year. And we've kind of laid that out for you. I'm just going to go ahead and pass it off to Gus so that he can kind of give a further explanation regarding all the information that's included in your packet. There's quite a bit of information in there. And so with that, Gus, if you want to go ahead and kind of provide us with a little briefing.
Absolutely. Thank you, Director Taylor. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Gus Corey, Legislative Advocate for the Madera County Transportation Commission. If it's not too late to still wish you Happy New Year, 18 days into the into 2023. Happy New Year to you. Hope that it's a healthy and prosperous one for us all. So the legislature convened the 23-24 session on December 5th, came in for the day. New members were sworn in. There have been some changes to our delegation, I think, as most are aware. We picked up an extra representative given the redistricting commission's work in December of 2021. And so we no longer have Assemblymember Frank Bigelow nor Senator Andres Borges. We do retain Senator Ana Caballero. We inherit Assemblymember Jim Patterson, who represents portions of Fresno and now Madera. Assemblymember Esmeralda Soria, she, former city council member in Fresno, also has a portion of Madera County. And then Senator Maria Alvarado Gil, she's the new senator for the new district created for redistricting. So we'll have 2 senators and 2 assembly members, yes, 2 senators and 2 assembly members, which is exciting. So more resources to help us forward our interests in the coming year. And so the legislature adjourned for the winter break, came back on the 4th. Governor Newsom introduced his proposed fiscal year 23-24 state budget. There's a copy of this in your packet. And so we were riding quite the wave during the pandemic. In fiscal year 21-22, we had 2021, we had a $53 billion deficit. We wound up having a surplus of $76 billion in 21-22, and then a $97.5 billion surplus for the 22-23 budget. So it's a little staggering coming off of those totals to then see a $22.5 billion state deficit. But fear not, there are sufficient revenues in the state's rainy day fund, which is over $35.6 billion. And so more than a sufficient amount to cover over any programs. The legislature made a lot of prudent choices last year with funding just one-time expenditures so that we wouldn't have much grief in dealing with ongoing programmatic obligations. And so for transportation, what does all that mumbo jumbo mean? We're lucky that transportation is predominantly funded through special funds. So it's the gas tax, it's the vehicle registration fee. Last year was really the first time since 2009 that the legislature had appropriated any general fund money towards transportation. And some of that went towards the active transportation program to augment what's been a oversubscribed program there. There was somewhat of a conditional promise made by the legislature that they would make $4 billion available for transit over the course of the next 2 fiscal years for 23-24 and 25-26, but that was conditioned upon having revenues to do so. So the governor is taking back some of that money. So sorry, did I miss something? Oh, sorry. Okay, so I thought I heard somebody speak up. Okay. But overall, they're mainly cash flow balancing items. I think I would defer to Caltrans on, there is a proposal to fund the active transportation program out of the state highway account, but I don't think that that's going to have play a role in being able to still deliver shop projects. And we definitely have a priority shop project that we're looking to receive funding for Avenue 7 through 12. So we're working closely with Caltrans and the California Transportation Commission on that endeavor. So with that, I think there's been such a tremendous infusion of funding into transportation from the state through the enactment of Senate Bill 1, from the general fund to an extent, as I mentioned, and then through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that Congress passed a couple years back. And so most of the changes, and there's really 2 versions. We always like to show our work to show you what we as a body had previously adopted, and then to show the suggested changes. And then I think there's a clean copy for you to look at. But our number 1 priority is, we're a small county. I was listening to the previous conversation. It's really hard for us to be able to generate resources to take care of what are really state assets, to help out with mobility. The crazy storms that came through here that wreak havoc on our infrastructure, that necessitate evacuations and such. The state needs to be a partner to shoulder the burden here, but we try to do our best to bring resources to the table too. But our priority, again, is to try to reconcile the receipt of funding so that we can eliminate the nearly 6-mile bottleneck on State Route 99 and keep going down the chain so that we can help support goods movement. People in my rounds with folks in the legislature, even the governor's office, I've told people that, folks talk about getting to Yosemite, well, you've got to drive right through our neck of the woods to do that. And so it's in everybody's interest in order to fortify infrastructure, as Supervisor Porthos has mentioned, is really decades old, and that needs attention. So just a couple other quick highlights in here. We work very closely with the San Joaquin Valley Regional Policy Council. I know that some of you have participated in those conversations. We'll be having a conversation at the end of the month for their legislative platform. We are stronger when the 8 cogs speak as one voice. We do try to communicate that highways are a big part of it. It's because most people drive, but we have been vocal about our support for passenger rail service, even high-speed rail, active transportation. We've looked at every opportunity to try to bring resources into the region. And now with the governor talking about wanting to cite inland ports, that's only going to put more stress on our systems. It's going to exacerbate issues for disadvantaged communities that have no choice of taking transit, that have to rely on 99 or other arterials such as 41 to get to work or conduct daily activities. So that's item number 2. We try to sort of encapsulate that. 3, on transit funding reform. Transit's heavily subsidized. The COVID pandemic didn't do transit ridership many favors. And so we want to be supportive of efforts to provide transit operators with flexibility to try to get ridership back and help our most vulnerable populations. Anything that we could do with paratransit service, and particularly service that most folks don't really think about is the yard service that we do along with several other counties, Madera, Mariposa, Merced, Tuolumne, and Mono, to support access into Yosemite. So we'll be looking for some assistance there to augment some funding. And then number 4 is really the biggest topic. It's what everyone in the legislature wants to talk about, and that's greenhouse gas emissions. And we're doing our best. We worked very diligently last year with several members of the legislature. There was legislation that was harmful that I reported on before. We were successful in getting the legislation vetoed or defeated in committee. And it's because one of the bills, if you may recall, AB 2237, that was authored by the Assembly Transportation Committee Chair, would have allowed the state to go into your Measure T expenditure plan and prioritize projects on your behalf for delivery, which would have went against the will of the voters and the fiduciary responsibility that you have to voters to deliver on all elements of your expenditure plan. And then 2438, this bill would have made all the state funding programs subject to, it would have enforced needing to have multimodal components, and it would have deprioritized investments on the state highway system, which again, in our neck of the woods, given our economy, given our demographics, is not feasible. So the governor vetoed that bill. Those 2 bills have been reintroduced as spot bills, AB 6 and 7. So we'll look to take action along with other regions in the state, again, to convey that we are working diligently to look at multimodal options, but we cannot neglect the state highway system. So that's 4. And then 5 is just more of an emphasis on passenger rail service, again, just to balance out our narrative about looking for multimodal options. Director Taylor, one element on here, and commissioners, that I was remiss in adding was something to do with the Brown Act. That now under the Brown Act, the governor is lifting the COVID emergency declaration effective February 28th. And so we will no longer be able to meet under the current allowances made under AB 361 unless you either petition the governor for a state of emergency or he makes another state of emergency declaration. Otherwise, we're under the provisions of AB 2449. And so we have limited opportunities for individual board members to participate virtually. This is an endeavor that CalCog is attempting to tackle, but I've heard from several Valley cogs along the Central Coast that they definitely have an interest in having that flexibility, given the challenging times that we're facing, and making sure that you continue to do the people's work and that there's more access provided for public participation in your decision making. And so that's one item that's not on here. I think my initial reaction was it's not necessarily a Madera initiated item, but I'm happy to amend and reference if that is the will of the commission. And so with that, I'll stop, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments that commissioners or members of the public may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Gus. At this time, I'll ask if any commissioner has any questions for Mr. Corey.
I have a question, and thanks, Gus, for that presentation. And I just had a question in regards to, and I can't remember if it's AB6 or AB7, that does it, if one of those were to pass, or both of them were to pass, does that give the legislature the ability, or Caltrans the ability, to change our existing measure, in this case, measure T, or is it future measures? For instance, let's say, they pass this legislation this year, but it's, we do something and pass something in 2026. Does that give them the ability to go in and change that?
To grandfather, yeah, good question, Supervisor. So the current bill, it's AB6, it's just merely intent language. So there isn't enough specificity or direction that's given. It's just stating the overall intention of the legislation. And it doesn't necessarily discriminate between an existing or a prospective sales tax measure. So,
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
of course.
Any other questions from my commissioners? I'll ask if there's any member of the public with any questions. Okay. All right, so thank you again, Gus, for that presentation.
Of course. And I think Director Taylor, were we looking for an action on the legislative platform?
So this item is a draft item, and we'll be bringing it back in February to approve the platform.
There we go.
It is discussion only, right? So, yeah. All right, moving on to item 9, MCTC sitting as the Madera County Transportation Commission. Item 9, reaffirm all actions taken while sitting as a Transportation Policy Committee. I'll entertain a to approve. Okay.
Second.
We do have a motion from Commissioner Rogers, a second from Commissioner Poitras. Sandy, can you take the roll?
Commissioner Rogers,
Yes.
Commissioner Poitras.
Yes.
Commissioner Ahmed,
Yes.
Commissioner Gallegos.
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
All right. We have the administrative consent items. I'll spare the time here, and I read this before several times, so is there anybody from the public wishing to make a comment on these items? All right, so I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Gonzalez, second from Commissioner Gallegos. Sandy, roll please.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yes.
Commissioner Gallegos,
Yes.
Commissioner Ahmed,
Yes.
Commissioner Poitras.
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers,
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll move on to item 11. This is administrative action discussion items. Item 11A, MCTC Policy Board Committee appointments.
Thank you. Every year, we have to revisit our appointments since we do lose members on our board, and we've lost a couple of members. And so there were 3 committees that you serve on behalf of the Madera County Transportation Commission that we need to make a few appointments for. And so the first one that I have outlined in your staff report is the San Joaquin Valley Regional Policy Council. And this is the what Gus referenced a little bit earlier, is a committee made up of 2 elected officials from each county in the 8-county area in the valley. And we discuss air quality issues, transportation issues, of challenges of interest and concern that we all share amongst each other. And then in addition, our lobbying activities, our advocacy activities. And so this is the group that goes to Sacramento and goes to Washington, DC. And we currently have Supervisor Poitras is actually the chair of the committee at this time. And the vacancy is Supervisor Frazier is no longer with us. He was the second representative. And then our our alternate was Commissioner Rodriguez. And so it's the wishes of this board if you, and whether or not Commissioner Rodriguez would be interested in serving into the replacement of Supervisor Frazier, then we would need to appoint an alternate, but it's up to this board as to how you'd like to proceed with the nomination for those particular appointments.
And we're taking them one at a time.
Yeah, we'll take
Okay.
these, yeah.
So again, we do have an opportunity. I never deny anything, but again, I think it's important that this board here has consensus as far as who you want representing. So I'll leave it up to my board.
I'll make a motion to appoint Jose. He's been active and it's always good to have people who are experienced and know the process and have met people. So I'd like to nominate him to be the second member.
You like Starbucks? You like Starbucks?
That's your brother. I'll second.
Thank you. I'm honored. This time, well, there is a motion from Commissioner Poitras and a second from Commissioner Gonzalez. Sandy, I'll have you take roll.
Certainly. Commissioner Poitras?
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
Yes.
Commissioner Ahmed?
Yes.
Commissioner Gallegos?
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers?
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
I just want to say thank you for your confidence and I'm honored. Thank you. Moving on,
The alternate for that particular committee.
there is an alternate.
I'd like to nominate Wasim so we have representation from the county, the city, and Chowchilla.
Second.
Okay, we do have a motion from Commissioner Gallegos, second from Commissioner Gonzalez. Sandy, can you please take the roll?
Yes. Commissioner Gallegos?
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
Yes.
Commissioner Ahmed?
Yes.
Commissioner Poitras?
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers?
Yeah.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. The next committee is the California Association of Council of Governments, which we refer to as CalCog. And currently, and I apologize in my staff report, I think I put down that you were second vice president, but Supervisor Poitras is now the first vice president of that particular committee. And I believe it was Diana Palmer who was the alternate. So we would need to include a representative for that particular committee as an alternate representative. And this is a statewide group. This is a statewide that handles transportation issues statewide. The next meeting for CalCog will be a conference on March 5th through the 7th, I believe it is, and it's going to be in Riverside. And I'm sorry, I failed to mention earlier, the next policy council meeting will be Friday, the 27th, this coming Friday, virtual. But the one in Riverside will be in person. And so, just so that you're aware that they do meet and they meet virtually and they also meet in person. They're gonna try to meet in person.
They can continue to meet virtually.
They will, well, the conference will be in person and then they're gonna hold a couple in person. I think they wanted to try to do a quarterly, was it a quarterly or a semi-year, maybe only one time a year in person. They felt the need that it was great to see each other in person and network and see face to face. So this is for the alternate position.
I nominate Wasim.
Man, I get like a vote of confidence here today.
Not being here, Wasim.
I
Be the chair, so.
I should be more absent.
You do have a motion from Commissioner Gonzalez, second Commissioner Poitras, and you please take roll.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
Yes.
Commissioner Poitras?
Yes.
Commissioner Ahmed?
Yes.
Commissioner Gallegos?
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers?
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
The next item is the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority. This is dealing with rail, Amtrak services, and we need to appoint a representative and an alternate. The representative actually was Supervisor Frazier. He was going to be chair, so he's really sad that he can't continue on in his role as chair for this Joint Powers Authority. The interest here locally would be a relocation of the Amtrak station. And so looking for someone who's interested in rail. And I know that Supervisor Rodriguez was very close. He was a member as well.
To appoint Letty.
I'll second that.
That's the one that meets quarterly, right?
It doesn't meet quarterly, or is it bi-monthly?
Okay, that's good.
And they have virtual and in person, correct? So virtually and in person.
Next Friday.
And then we need an alternate for that as well, but I don't know if you want to go ahead and do the representative and then an alternate.
Sure. Okay, so we do have a motion. Commissioner Rogers, I did second that myself. Sandy, can you take roll, please?
Commissioner Rogers,
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Yes.
Commissioner Ahmed,
Yes.
Commissioner Gallegos.
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yes,
Commissioner Poitras.
Yes.
Thank you, motion carries.
thank you.
And the alternate was Supervisor Wheeler, but it's the wishes of this board is to see.
To appoint, Mr. Rodriguez.
Really? Okay, good. That's another one. Great. We have a motion.
I'll second.
There's a second for Commissioner Gonzalez. Sandy?
Commissioner Rogers.
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yes.
Commissioner Ahmed,
Yes.
Commissioner Gallegos,
Yes.
Commissioner Poitras.
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
Yes.
Thank you, motion carries.
And so the next meeting of that committee will be Friday, the 27th at 9. And so they moved the meetings around so that the policy council and the Joint Powers Authority won't conflict in those meetings. So
Awesome. And are those all the appointments we have?
those are all the appointments for
All
today.
right, so I will give an opportunity to our public. I'm not sure if they have any comment on these votes already been made, but if you have any comment.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
everyone.
See, there you go.
We'll need some help in about 6 months.
Okay.
When there's an additional member of the family here.
Look forward to that, and congratulations. I'd be more than happy. Moving on to other items. Item number 12, miscellaneous items from staff.
I did have a couple of items, like getting used to this new agenda format here. Okay, so just wanted to let you all know that we're exploring the opportunity. Madera was selected for an October California Transportation Committee meeting. And so we're looking at where we might be able to hold these particular meetings at a 2-day meeting, and your staff is involved, and we'll be going on Friday to kind of tour some locations. Hopefully the Board of Supervisors chambers would be able to accommodate, but we're looking into various different sites. It's a big deal, and so it's great to have them here. They've never held a meeting in Madera, so I hope we can accommodate to the best of our ability, and we'll probably be having tours, and there'll be a lot of work to prepare for their visit, so be ready for that. And then, so that's beginning now. Pardon me?
Which organization is it?
The California Transportation Commission.
Will it be in the morning?
It will be, normally what they do is they'll be start in the afternoon on like a Wednesday, and then it'll go on Thursday, all day on Thursday, but to be determined on the exact times.
That's the one that Leanne Eager's the chairman of.
Yes, and she will be, when I understand, I'm not sure if that appointment has been made, but I think she's chair again. I know she's chair again, whether or not that action has been taken or not, but I know that that's moving forward with her to have a second year as chair. And she's very supportive of Madera, and it has been very helpful to work and pleasant to work with as well. And so we're looking forward to that. And I did mention, it doesn't start till the afternoon. That's the actual meeting. We'll probably be doing tours. So it's 2 full days. So we'll probably have some touring in that morning and a reception the evening before and all that kind of stuff. So the next item that I wanted to mention was to congratulate the county. They had a successful application. I know this is probably old news because we have not met since November, but a successful rural mega grant in the amount of 25 million. As a matter of fact, it's one of your items on the consent calendar, item 7J, I believe. And they also were successful in receiving a community grant from Congressman Costa and 1.95 million for the exact same project. So it's State Route 41 Expressway. And so congratulations to the County of Madera and successful applications. That's getting phone calls from people from different areas. So obviously it's a great success story to tell.
Yes, it is.
Thank you, Jared.
That's a true.
And that's all the items I have.
All right, thank you, Ms. Taylor.
I got one.
Yes, Coach Troy.
Some administrative items, current policy has for check signing for our bank account is we have 2 signatures, one from staff, one from a board member. Because we've had change in our board makeup, it necessitates a change in our check signing card. And so I have that with me. If after the end of the meeting, you can just see me and have you sign the action for that, so we can be all on the accounts appropriately.
Great. So those of you that haven't signed checks, make sure you see Troy. Let's get that going.
I think we need all
All of
fresh
them.
signatures. So I, right, Troy, fresh signatures from everyone.
All right, we'll get that going. Thank you. Any other items from staff? If not, then we'll move on to items from Caltrans. Mr. Navarro?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, commissioners. Good to see you all. Couple grant deadlines come up here soon. Clean California update. So we're going through cycle 2. It's $100 million available. Very successful cycle 1 for our district here in this region. And so we expect the call to come out the end of this month with application due April 2023. So please let us know if any of your agencies have any interest in pursuing. We've had 2 stakeholder workshops so far. They're well attended, and I believe they're gonna have another one once the call for project goes out. The other discretionary grant programs coming up, we're preparing for Highways and Boulevard, which is reconnecting communities, very similar to the federal program that the city applied for, but the state pot. There's $150 million available there. I'm happy to work with any of your agencies if you're considering going after an application. And then the call for raise is out currently, $1.5 billion. That's a federal program with applications due end of February 28th. Also, the annual Caltrans planning grant cycle's coming up. So we just had our call for projects went out January 12th with applications due March 9th. This area's been very successful in that as well. So this year there'll be a one-time $50 million climate adaptation planning grant pot. Then the typical sustainable communities grant pot, which is $29.5 million, and the strategic partnership grants for $4.5 million. And like I said, these are for planning studies. In the district, we will be having a workshop on January 31st. We'll be doing it in person as well as a hybrid format. So really encourage to have your staff represented at that meeting coming up. We'll do a presentation. We'll bounce ideas. We're happy to look at applications preliminarily as well. As for projects, we continue to work on the South Madera 6-lane project between Avenue 7 to Avenue 12. That's the project where we're partnering with our shop as well as the STIP. We're finalizing some estimates, working that through to get that amended into the shop plan. We continue to work on the downtown Madera CAPM. I think we're actually having a meeting this Friday while Chair Eager at the city of Madera, so I do plan on attending that. And we were able to get some additional money, not a whole lot, but $775,000 from, I think in those meetings we talked about some climate change money is available through the state. And so we're looking at some opportunities for transit shelters and shade trees to fund as part of that project. So we were able to get that additional funding that we talked about to add to that project. So we'll continue to work with the city on getting that done. It's going through design right now. The 99-233 interchange project. So we're working on the cost estimate to finish design and right away. And we will be meeting with the city this month to discuss. So the design is working on the project report now. Environmental is working on their studies and is targeting March, April for circulating that environmental document. And we're hoping to approve project approval and environmental document targeting June of 2023. The Cottonwood Creek Bridge replacement on State Route 99, that project would accommodate the 6-lane configuration of State Route 99. That was one that got pushed back, so we started off with winter suspension for that project. So we anticipate having the groundbreaking targeting April at this point. The Madera South Expressway project. So we're working with a consultant on their 60% review plans. I know there's some sensitivity in getting that moving forward with the expediting review because of the grant award and making sure we're able to deliver that project in alignment with that grant Madera County received. Also, we're having a conversation with the county about going after a raise grant as well for that project. So working with Madera County's consultant and the county, we did submit a request to headquarters for a letter of support for that project to support that for their raise application. And then lastly, the Ranchos Rehab Project, which is on State Route 41 between Avenue 15 and State Route 145. This is the pavement rehab project out there. They'll widen the shoulders and elevate some sections for potential to flooding. That project was advertised this last fall. The bids were open on December 8th.
That project will be getting awarded here soon, and we anticipate construction starting on February 8th. With that completes my update. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Do we have any questions from any member of the commission?
I just have a question in regards to, Michael, in regards to, we talked about 99 from 12 to 7. Maybe just go into a little more detail as far as what we might be looking at as far as timing, timeline in terms of getting that project moving.
So a couple moving parts on this one. As mentioned, we're going through revised cost estimates so we can get the dollars dialed down for the shop contribution. There are some questions about how much of the shop is going towards the rehabilitation and how much is going towards the actually capacity component of it, which is stiff. So we're working with headquarters, diving that in. I think we're targeting getting that, was it like March, I think that you mentioned?
Hopefully March CTC.
Hopefully March CTC we're targeting. The other moving component to that is the quarter plan that we've been working through. I've talked to Patricia, we're in that last stage with our legal review team, and our legal staff unfortunately is understaffed like all of our teams are, but my understanding is that'll be given to an attorney on Monday. We're expecting probably about a 2-week review, which is the final step for us to be able to get that RFP out, to get that consultant on to work on that valley-wide corridor plan, which was a condition along with the 99 Summit for the ITIP fund. So I think we have plenty of time for construction still for that, but we're still probably a few years out before construction of that project.
Thank you for answering that, because I was under the impression we were going to be a lot closer as far as construction, but it seems like it's in and what I fear is the longer we kick it out for construction, you know, I know that there's political things and winds that could come in and crush, you know, the program, or to continue to delay it. And that's really what really concerns me.
Right. No, I understand your concern. I know that project is still in the ITIP. It was programmed in the outer year of the ITIP, unfortunately. So I think that stayed status quo, but I haven't heard anything about trying to push that out any further. Like I said, I think we're just trying to navigate through the programming aspect of it now. And then obviously, like I said, the quarter plan with the condition where we had to complete that quarter plan, which we envision probably being a 18-month study or something along those lines to look at the whole managed lane.
That's incredible. 18 months. Wow. Is there any way that we can push it along politically, or anything that we can do? Because I mean, I just find it incredible. I mean, I'm not getting on you.
No, I know.
I know that you're not doing the plan, but I'm just saying that I just find that incredible that it's 18 months.
To do a study like that, probably, because as you recall, this study wasn't just, it was for 99 going from basically Sacramento all the way to Kern County and look at it. So it is gonna be a very comprehensive study. I think it did, with that time frame, it did work into the schedule we're looking at, because the ITIP was, I think it's, I want to say 25, 26, I think it was.
It's in 26, 27, I believe in the ITIP, but they were gonna try to move it up to 25, 26.
Right. And so we were, and there has been opportunities we talked about as funding comes available. If there's projects that are ready to go, we would definitely have that conversation of, even with the ITIP condition, looking to advance it if it is ready to go sooner.
And again, just one final thing, is there, and I'll ask it again, is there anything we can do politically or from this board or the Regional Policy Council or legislators or whatever to make sure that this thing doesn't get sidetracked?
Yeah, I mean, just think, I know you have your Valley Voice efforts and things like that. I think the continual conversation is probably fine. I'm not aware of any challenges we're having now and moving forward. I mean, my understanding that project's been blessed to move forward. So I think just a continual conversation. It's probably at this point, but I'm sure as things come up, we're happy to let you know.
Very
We can get.
Well, and I appreciate District 6 and everything you guys do, and appreciate the partnership, and thanks so much.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Right.
Appreciate that.
Here in Madera, we just like guarantees. I want to make sure that that's earmarked so that we're not being pushed aside or by some political wave or something, right?
Understood.
Any other questions? I did have a question in regards to the version of the state's reconnecting communities. Now, this is a newer funding opportunity, right?
It is. So it kind of mirrors the federal program. The federal program, I think, was $300 million available. We talked about that. It was gonna be a tough pull for that one, because that was, nationwide, $300 million. And the state one is for California only, and it's 149 million. So obviously half the amount, but it's for California only. But the parameters and the goals are very consistent. It's highways and boulevards, reconnecting communities, things where transportation is a barrier. So it could be another opportunity. The thing we probably want to talk about with the team is obviously the timing of product delivery.
And that was gonna be my question, if we can tap into those funds and enhance the project. I'm not sure if it's too late in the project design or what have you, but at least the aesthetics or something else that we can have.
Right, right. And I think, you know, for that one, like we said, at some point, there's a pencils down, obviously, with the design team. So there could be a way to scope items that maybe don't affect the design that still enhance that corridor as well. So I think it's definitely a conversation worth having.
And I think, you know, for those that don't know, that's one of the things of why I think it's important to have our chair of the California Transportation Commission to come and see this project and somewhat of a pilot of what's taking place with these reconnecting communities, right? And this Madera would be a perfect example of that. So thank you, Mike. I want to recognize what you've done, not only helping us write the grants for the original Mark Thomas report, but also being instrumental in helping us with this project and moving it along. So great partner, MCTC, and all the other partners that are part of this project that's going underway. Commissioner Rogers, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to also thank Mike. I've known Mike for quite a while and privileged to work with him on this commission again. And just to piggyback on what you said about the connecting communities, you have a similar circumstance to Chowchilla with a major thoroughfare there. And love to, I know Commissioner Wasim, we can talk about how this works for you and get involved in changing some of the elements of Chowchilla as well. I think it's just a perfect mirror of what's happening there, and we need to follow that same example. So I wanted to alert Wasim to my support in that area as well.
I think it's a great, you know, great methodology we laid out when we go through that process with Madera, because we started off with a planning grant process. We came up with a vision. We had a Caltrans rehab project to piggyback off of. So we were able to demonstrate the outreach and engagement to put them in a position to compete for complete street fund dollars, et cetera.
Right.
And Chowchilla, actually, Chowchilla was awarded, I'm sure the Chowchilla or MCTC, I think it was administered by MCTC, but we did have that planning grant. But we did actually look at the whole Chowchilla, you know, corridor for 233. So kind of the same path we went with 145,
Right.
to your point.
Right.
So I think, and then we do have a Caltrans project coming through there over the next couple of years. A pavement rehabilitation project, which creates opportunity for us to do things, add elements, complete streets, elements, restripe, et cetera. If you know, the city's will to do some transformative improvements. So
The idea of the shade trees as well. That's great idea. And just again, thank you for all you do. Mike is so responsive. I mean, we send him, we communicate with him regularly, our office does, and he just gets it done. The get it done kind of guy.
thank you. Guys are too kind. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I
Yes, I'm
ask a
sorry,
question?
Commissioner Ahmed. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to know the study that he's talking about on the downtown 233. What's the status of it? I mean, when is the start date? I know the study was completed now.
Yeah, the study was completed. I'd have to look. That's probably a project I should start reporting on. I know it's a pavement rehabilitation project that we finished the project initiation document. I believe it's environmental. So I'll start reporting on that project as well for future meetings. We still have a little bit of time, but there is an opportunity to have those conversations. Actually, we talked about it a little bit today and looking at some of our stats of projects on opportunities for hopefully try and leverage some additional complete street dollars for this one as well.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it.
I can email you the schedule.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we'll move on to items from commissioners, and we'll start off with you, Commissioner Ahmed. Do you have anything you'd like to report on?
No, I just wanted to thank everyone for their support and voting me in as a chair. So it's a great pleasure and coming back on the commission again and working with all of you guys. Thank you so much. That's all.
Awesome. Thank you, Commissioner Ahmed. Commissioner Rogers?
Nothing to report.
Okay, I'll bring it back to you, Commissioner Gonzalez.
No, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to serve. I'm excited to be a part of this committee now. And I wanted to share that I talked to Patricia a couple weeks ago about this, but I was invited to participate in my very first lobbying trip to Washington, DC. It's part of a different hat that I wear that's not part of the county. But they did invite me to bring Madera County issues. So I'll definitely get some talking points from you to take back to Washington, and excited to do that for the first time. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Gonzalez. Commissioner Poitras?
Nothing to report. Thank you.
All right, and with that, I too have nothing to report other than
Thank you for joining us today. I will now adjourn this meeting. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Try to stay dry if you can.